This happened about 2 months ago. I'm a 31-year-old nurse and work nights at a downtown hospital. I've done night shifts before, so I thought I knew what to expect. But this place felt different. It was old, with flickering lights and strange sounds in the hallways. The shift felt long and tiring, and I never stopped thinking about those nights. On my second night, I was walking down a quiet hallway. It was late, maybe around 2 a.m. I heard soft murmurs from an empty room. I thought it was a radio left on in the break room, but when I got close, everything fell silent. I should have turned around, but my curiosity got the better of me. My heart was racing as I crept closer, the lights buzzing above me. By the end of that week, something even stranger happened. I was at the nurse's station checking my notes when a shadow passed by the corner of my eye. I looked up, but there was nobody there. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but a shiver ran down my spine. I felt the patient's eyes on me, lingering in a way that made me uneasy. I wondered if they sensed something wrong in the air. One night, I was preparing medication when a patient in room 427 called for me. She was in her 70s and looked confused. She insisted she saw her late husband sitting in the corner of her room earlier. Hearing that made me uneasy. "Maybe it was just a dream," I said softly. The way she looked at me felt haunting. She said, "He said he's waiting for me." I couldn't shake her words off. That night, I found myself wandering the hallways, hoping to find the source of my unease. The lights flickered above me, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Suddenly, I heard whispers again, faint and distant. They seemed to come from nowhere, just echoing around me. My hands felt cold and I gripped the wall tightly, afraid to turn around. I asked who was there, but only silence greeted me. Then, I saw a figure. It was a blur. My heart pounded harder. I couldn't make out any features, but something about it pulled me in. I wanted to approach it, but fear stopped me. I could hardly breathe. Then I turned away, wishing I hadn't seen anything at all. After that, I struggled to focus on my work. I still hear whispers sometimes, creeping up on me in the dark of the night. I don't know if it's just exhaustion playing tricks on me, or if something else lingers in the hospital's hallways. The more I think about it, the more I question my sanity. I wonder if I'll ever truly know what's happening there. Then the figure turned and smiled at me. I didn't breathe. There was nobody else in the hallway. The next night was even worse. I tried to keep my head down and focus on my job, but the heaviness in the air was suffocating. As I walked past room 427, I found myself glancing in. The patient was asleep, but the memory of her husband's presence still lingered in my mind. It made me uneasy, as if ghosts of the past were very much alive in that room. Later, while I was restocking supplies in the nurse's station, I noticed a small envelope placed neatly on the counter. I hadn't seen it before. My pulse quickened. I opened it cautiously, and my heart sank. Inside was a single photograph, grainy and dark, but unmistakably, it showed a figure resembling the one I had seen in the hallway. The blur was clearer now, and it looked like it was standing right where I had seen it before. There was no note, just that chilling image. I felt someone standing behind me. I spun around, expecting to see a colleague, but the station was empty. That sinking feeling hit me again. The sense that I was being watched. It wasn't just my imagination. I could feel it in my bones. I hurried back to my duties, trying to shake off the oppressive atmosphere. As the hours crawled by, I heard the whispers again. They were louder, more demanding this time. I stepped out of the nurse's station and followed the sound. My heart raced as I walked past familiar rooms, the whispers leading me deeper into the hospital. It was as if they were calling me to a specific place. When I arrived at the end of a long corridor, the air grew colder. I paused, my breath visible in the dim light. The whispers stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw the figure again. It appeared clearer now, its features defined. A pale face and hollow eyes staring back at me. I froze. Every instinct told me to run, but I stood there paralyzed in place. I felt an overwhelming urge to speak, to ask who or what it was. And then, I did something I hadn't intended. "What do you want?" My voice trembled. The figure stepped closer, its smile widening unnaturally. I felt a chill wash over me. This was no comforting spirit. This was something else entirely. I wanted to back away, but my feet wouldn't move. Then everything went dark. The lights flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my flashlight, desperate to see. The whispers returned, louder, more insistent, filling the void where the light had been. It felt like they were closing in on me. Finally, the emergency lights kicked in, dimly illuminating the hallway. I looked around, and my breath caught in my throat. The figure was gone, but right in front of me was room 427. Its door was ajar, and a cold breeze swept through as if inviting me in. I hesitated, but I couldn't ignore the pull any longer. I stepped forward, barely able to breathe, and peeked inside. That's when I saw it, an object on the floor, glinting in the low light. It looked like a key, but I knew it was more than just that. I knelt down and picked up the key. It was old and heavy, with intricate engravings that seemed to swirl down its length. I wondered why it had been abandoned there. The air felt charged, as if the room itself was holding its breath. My heart thudded loudly in my chest. Suddenly, I heard a shuffle behind me. I whipped around, but the hallway was empty. Despite the faint light from the emergency bulbs, I felt a deepening darkness creeping in, pressing against my thoughts. I didn't have to be a psychic to know something was wrong. I slipped the key into my pocket, feeling its weight against my thigh. It was my instinct to leave room 427, but curiosity gnawed at me. What could this key unlock? I glanced back to the room, my heart racing again. The whispers returned, stronger this time, echoing off the walls, surrounding me like an unseen force trying to draw me deeper into the shadows. Taking a breath, I stepped into the room completely. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Dusty and stale, as if nothing had disturbed this place in years. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out any light. I could barely make out the outlines of furniture shrouded in darkness. There was a small bedside table, a chair, and a wardrobe against the far wall. I shook my head to clear my thoughts. I needed to stay focused. The whispers began to morph into words, just out of reach. My heart raced more with each passing second. I could feel the oppressive weight of the room pressing down on me. I approached the wardrobe, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. Something felt wrong about it, an electric charge in the air. I hesitated before grasping the handle. I could feel the memory of other nurses who had probably avoided this room just like I should. Maybe there were reasons why whispers followed me, why doors creaked open at night. With a quick pull, I opened the wardrobe door. Inside, I found a collection of old hospital gowns and what looked like a faded photograph. My breath hitched as I reached for it. The image was black and white, worn at the edges. It depicted a woman. Her face seemed familiar, though I couldn't place where I had seen her before. As I studied the photo, a chill ran down my spine. I flipped the photograph over and saw something hastily scrawled on the back. "She won't let you leave." Suddenly, I felt a rush of air, cold and sharp, sweeping through the room. I dropped the photograph and stumbled back, a panic rising within me. The whispers intensified, now full of anger and urgency. I turned to bolt for the door, but it slammed shut. Instinctively, I pressed my back against the wall, searching for another way out. The whispers became frantic, words coherent yet incomprehensible, as if they were in a language I couldn't understand but felt in my bones. I was losing my grip on reality, feeling trapped between this world and whatever lay beyond. That's when I heard it clearly. Someone was screaming. Not just a simple sound, but a raw, chilling cry that ripped through the air, resonating deep within my chest. It pierced my very being, and I knew in that moment I had to escape. Whatever had been awakened was coming for me now. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity. The screaming echoed relentlessly. It curled around me, wrapping me in a blanket of dread. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, searching for a logical explanation. But nothing made sense. The room felt smaller, the shadows thicker. Without thinking, I lunged for the wardrobe, desperate for something, anything that could give me a fighting chance. I rifled through the gowns, but they were just fabric, limp and lifeless. The screams twisted into laughter, an eerie sound that sent ice through my veins. That's when I noticed something at the back of the wardrobe, half hidden in darkness. My fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled at it, revealing a small latch on the wall. My heart raced with hope. Could this be the way out? I fumbled with it, adrenaline flooding my system. The screams faded, but the whispers remained, hissing like snakes in the grass. With a final tug, the latch clicked open. I pushed the panel, and it creaked slowly forward, revealing a narrow opening. Light spilled from within, a warm glow that beckoned me. Without hesitation, I crawled through. On the other side, I found myself in a dimly lit corridor. The light flickered overhead, buzzing like a swarm of angry bees. It felt strangely familiar, like I had walked these halls before. The air was cooler here, filled with a faint scent of antiseptic. I felt a twinge of relief and fear. I wasn't sure what awaited me. As I moved down the corridor, I heard it again. Soft, shuffling footsteps behind me. I turned but saw no one. The hair on my arms stood up. I could feel a presence, something lingering just out of sight. Each step I took echoed, creating a haunting rhythm. I didn't want to look back. I couldn't. But as I continued to walk, I stumbled upon a door that was ajar. The whispers grew louder, a haunting mixture of desperation and sorrow. I hesitated but was pulled closer, a moth drawn to an unseen flame. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and inside was a room suffocated by darkness. The air was thick. A figure stood in the corner, shrouded in shadow. I could barely make out the contours of a face, but the eyes, they glowed with an otherworldly light. Everything in me screamed to run, but I couldn't. I was anchored to the spot, caught in its gaze. "Help me," the figure said, voice raspy as if years of pain were trapped within. "It's trapped in here with me." The panic flooded back. I turned to escape, but the door slammed shut once more. I pressed my back against it, heart racing. I could feel the cold presence moving closer, wrapping around me, suffocating. Suddenly, the figure lunged forward, reaching for me. I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat as I stumbled backward. I had to get away. But the whispers swarmed around me, drowning me in their urgency. Just as it felt like everything would tumble into chaos, a loud crash echoed through the corridor, resounding like thunder. The figure froze, its glowing eyes flickering. In that brief moment of distraction, I hurled myself at the door. It flew open, and I bolted into the hallway, my heart pounding in a frantic rhythm. But once again, I heard that shrill scream. Only this time, it wasn't from the figure. It was coming from behind me. I had no choice but to keep running, down the dark corridor, with fear clawing at my heels. The unmistakable certainty that I wasn't alone in this haunted place. I raced down the corridor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The walls closed in around me as I ran, and I could hear the scream echoing, growing louder, swallowing the space. It felt like I was being hunted. I passed doors on either side, their surfaces splintered and ancient, each one a potential prison. I didn't stop to look. I couldn't. I just focused on the flickering lights ahead, thinking maybe there was safety there. But every heartbeat reminded me of the figure lurking behind me, waiting for the right moment. Then, at the end of the hall, a door stood wide open. It beckoned me like a beacon. I dashed inside, slamming the door behind me. My palms pressed against the wood, and I could still hear faint whispers on the other side. But in this room, there was quiet, at least for a moment. I let my eyes adjust to the dim light. It was a small office, cluttered with papers and dark wooden furniture. A desk sat in one corner, strewn with empty coffee cups and old medical reports. I glanced around, desperate for something I could use. A tool? A weapon? But everything felt useless and mundane. Then I spotted a metal drawer. I rushed to it, yanked it open, and found it filled with syringes. My heart sank. What good would that do if the figure found me? I moved to the desk and skimmed through the papers. Most were unreadable, faded with time, but one caught my eye. It was a patient report. The name was familiar. I squinted at the paper, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. It was a record of a past resident, someone who had gone missing years ago. The notes detailed strange occurrences, whispers at night, unexplained disappearances. A chill settled over me as I realized this wasn't just a room. It was part of the very story I was caught in. Suddenly, the door rattled. My pulse quickened, and I stepped back. "Who's there?" I called, but my voice trembled like a fragile thread. The rattling stopped, and silence fell again. But I could feel it. The weight of something pressing against the other side, lingering, waiting. I needed to think. My mind raced as I scanned the room. That's when I noticed the small window. It was barred, but not too high. Maybe I could climb out. My heart raced with almost frantic hope. I approached it, but footsteps echoed outside the door. Far too many for comfort. The whispers grew louder, intensifying, as if they were coming from the walls themselves. Panic surged. The door began to creak open. I turned and flung myself toward the window. I grasped the bars, my fingers slipping against the cold metal in a desperate grip. The door burst open, revealing darkness. The glowing eyes stared straight at me, now accompanied by a cacophony of voices. "Get out!" I shouted, but the figure let out a low laugh that wrapped around me like a cold breeze. I felt its presence swell, heavy and powerful. My feet slipped off the desk as I struggled, and I was falling. Then everything went silent. The world faded to black, and I felt myself hit something soft. But as I lay there, breathless and disoriented, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't free, that something had followed me. I opened my eyes to find myself in a different room. My stomach dropped as I realized I was back in the corridor. I could still hear the laughter, quiet, but close. Someone, or something, was waiting for me, and the darkness was growing thicker. The hallway seemed to stretch on endlessly. I stood frozen, heart pounding in my chest. The laughter echoed, an unsettling melody that coiled around me. Was it coming from the same figure? Or were there others lurking in the shadows? As I took a tentative step forward, I felt a hard chill crawl up my spine. Each footfall reverberated against the cold tile, amplifying my fear. I remembered the whispers, the horror written in the patient report. What was happening here? I had to find a way out, but that meant moving deeper into the uncertainty. I turned and sprinted in the opposite direction. I had no clear plan, just the instinct to escape. I could hear whispers again, sharper now. They sounded almost like words, taunting me as I ran. My breath came out in quick bursts. Then, a flash of movement caught my eye. I glanced to the side and saw a figure dart between two doors, like a shadow slipping through the cracks. Panic surged again. My heart raced as I wondered if it was another patient, another lost soul from the records. But something told me this was not a human. Ignoring the urge to hide, I followed the figure. Maybe it would lead me somewhere safe. I skidded to a halt and peered around the doorframe. The room beyond was dark, the light failing to reach into every corner. I hesitated, unsure of what lay ahead, but I couldn't go back. Inside, the atmosphere felt thick. I stepped in, and the door swung shut behind me with a soft click. I turned to push it open, but it wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at my throat. A gust of wind swept through the room, carrying that familiar laughter with it, whispering my name. "Jennifer," it beckoned softly. "Join us." My stomach churned. I stumbled backwards, desperate to find an escape. I groped along the walls, searching for another exit. That's when my fingers brushed against something smooth and cold. I turned to look, and realized it was a mirror, the only reflection being the dim light of the room. Then, I saw something in that reflection that made me freeze. The shadowy figure from before stood behind me, glaring with those glowing eyes. My own face stared back at me, pale, wide-eyed, and terrified. I spun around, but nothing was there. Just the empty air and that dreadful laughter. "This isn't real," I whispered to myself, but it felt more like a plea than a statement. I could hear the whispers increase in volume, blending into that echoing laughter. It felt like they were alive, circling me, urging me to stay. I had to fight it off. I grabbed the edge of the mirror, hoping to shatter it and find my way out. But then the laughter stopped abruptly. In that thick silence, a low voice pierced through. "You can't leave. You belong to the night." I shuddered. I had to find a way to break through whatever had me trapped. But I didn't know how. I ran back to the door, throwing my shoulder against it, but it wouldn't budge. The wall felt solid and unyielding. Desperation clawed at me as I banged on the door. That's when I felt something touch my shoulder. I turned, and a sickening dread washed over me as I looked into the face of a small child. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin pale, and her eyes wide with fear just like mine. "Help me," she whispered, and I felt the warmth of her breath turn icy against my skin. Then everything went dark again, and I felt like I was falling into an abyss. I screamed, but no sound came out. I knew I had to wake up, but the darkness pulled me in deeper. I plunged into blackness, weightless and suffocated, lost in the vast void. Time slipped away. I struggled against the sensation of falling, of being consumed. Then, in a sudden shift, I hit the ground with a jolt, gasping for air. I found myself back in the dark room. But everything felt different. Shadows twisted at the edges, moving with a life of their own. A sudden chill wrapped around me, and I stood up, shaking off the dizzy dread that clung to my limbs. The mirror glimmered faintly, casting a pale light that revealed some details. I glanced away quickly. I didn't want to risk seeing whatever lurked behind me again. Instead, I focused on my surroundings. Musty air filled my lungs as I scanned for any escape. Somewhere, a faint sound echoed, a soft whimper, almost like a call for help. The child's voice. "Where are you?" I whispered, stepping cautiously toward the source of the sound. Each step felt heavier, as if the very ground resisted my movement. As I approached, the whimpering stopped, replaced by a silence so thick I could almost hear my heartbeat. Then, without warning, the room shifted again. The walls seemed to pulse, as if alive, breathing in and out. A flicker of movement caught my eye near the mirror. I turned just in time to see a glimpse of the child again. "This way," she pleaded, her voice echoing softly, filled with urgency. Without thinking, I followed, drawn by her fear and innocence. But I felt a presence at my back, a looming shadow that whispered cold warnings. "Don't follow her," it hissed. "You won't escape." My throat tightened. I could feel the weight of its gaze, like a vice squeezing my chest. But the child's voice pierced through the fog of terror surrounding me. I had to choose. I turned away from the shadow and sped toward her. When I reached the edge of the mirror, I felt a powerful surge, like stepping through an invisible barrier. Suddenly, I stood in another room, brightly lit, yet eerily sterile, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness behind me. It was a small examination room. Medical equipment lay scattered, and the smell of antiseptic hung in the air. Confusion washed over me. Was this a way out? Then, I noticed the walls. Pictures and words were scrawled all around, notes left by someone who had lost their grip on reality. I read snippets that made my stomach churn. They watch. Find the exit before nightfall, and trust no one. Before I could process it, I heard a door creak open behind me. I whirled around and saw not the girl, but another figure. A tall man with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes stepped into the light. He wore a hospital gown, stained and frayed, and I could almost taste the terror radiating off him. "Jennifer," he croaked, "you have to run. They're coming." My heart raced. "Who?" I demanded. But before he could answer, the room flickered again, and the darkness returned, swirling around us. I felt myself being pulled into another vortex. Before I was swallowed whole, I caught one last glance at his face, etched with an understanding of the horror that awaited. Then everything dissolved into a void once again. I gasped and braced myself, unsure of where I would end up next. A new void awaited, but now I was acutely aware of the shadows calling. I landed hard on a cold floor, my vision swimming back into focus. My palms pressed against the unforgiving surface as I blinked away the disorientation. The bright fluorescent lights above flickered ominously, casting long shadows against the sterile walls. I was in yet another unfamiliar room, but this one felt different, more claustrophobic, more suffocating. I pushed myself up and took stock of my surroundings. This room was larger than the last, filled with intimidating medical machines whose digital displays glowed like eerie eyes. I could almost hear their quiet humming, a reminder that I wasn't alone. I scanned the space for exits, but saw only a single door at the far end, slightly ajar. Hesitance gripped me. What if I found myself in another darkness the moment I stepped through? That was when I noticed a figure sitting on the floor in the corner. A young boy, no older than 10. He was hugging his knees to his chest, his dirty face streaked with tears. "Help me," he whimpered, his voice little more than a fragile whisper. My heart twisted. What happened? Where are you? I crouched down, trying to meet his fearful gaze. They watch us," he stammered, glancing nervously at the walls as if they had ears. "We have to go before it's too late." Frantically, I glanced around, feeling a tightening sensation in my chest. "Who's watching?" "What do you mean?" I asked, desperate for clarity. He shivered, looking back toward the door. "They come when it's dark. We have to find the exit." I felt a shiver run down my spine. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement just beyond the door, a flicker of shadow slipping in and out of sight. Panic gripped me. I couldn't allow that thing to reach the boy. I stood, offering him my hand. "Come with me," but he shrank away, shaking his head. "No, they'll know we left. You have to go. You'll be safe, but you have to hurry." I hesitated, my mind racing. Was this boy a trap? Was he as lost as I was, or part of something more sinister? I stepped back, feeling the fear that coursed through the room. Then, suddenly the temperature dropped as shadows pooled at the door. A guttural roar echoed from the hallway, sending cold dread spiraling through me. My breath caught. The shadows stretched and twisted, forming into something monstrous, a dark figure that seemed to absorb the light around it. "Run!" the boy shouted, but I was frozen in place. The creature loomed, its presence an immeasurable weight pushing down on my lungs. Just then, my instincts kicked in. I turned and sprinted toward the door, the child's terrified voice trailing behind me. As I clutched the doorknob, I felt a strong force teetering behind me, urging me to leave. But something in the pit of my stomach told me I couldn't abandon him. I threw open the door, bursting onto a new hallway, but it was dark, darker than the room. The sounds of my footsteps echoed ominously as I strained to catch any sign of the boy. Frantically, I glanced back, and for a brief moment, I saw him there, silhouetted against the creeping shadows. And then he was gone. I gripped the doorframe, my chest tightening once more. "What have I done?" I gasped. But before I could linger on the thought, an unsettling truth washed over me. I wasn't alone in this hallway. The darkness around me shifted, and out of it emerged another figure. This one was not a child, a woman, pale and ghostly, with sorrowful eyes. I felt a chill, realization dawning as I prepared myself for the reality of what was happening. I wasn't the only one trapped here, and the encounters were just beginning. The woman glided toward me, her feet barely touching the ground. She had an ethereal quality, as if she belonged to the shadows themselves. Her eyes bore a profound sadness that sent a shiver down my spine. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, I stepped back, heart racing. "Why are you here?" I finally managed to stammer. "What do you want?" Her gaze flickered, darting toward the end of the hallway, then back to me. "You must not linger," she said, her voice a soft echo that felt like it was wrapped in mist. "They will come for you too." "Who?" I asked, panic clawing at my throat. The memory of that dark figure surged in my mind. "What do you know?" "Time is short," she replied, moving closer. "You need to escape before they find you. Follow the light, but trust no one." With that, she faded into the surrounding darkness. I was left standing there, ears ringing in the eerie silence. My heart hammered against my ribcage as I turned and looked down the corridor. I longed to flee, but found myself paralyzed with uncertainty. Where was the light? And who were they? As I stood there, taking shallow breaths, I spotted a faint glow at the far end of the hallway. A spark of hope ignited in me, and I ran towards it. The closer I got, the brighter the glow became, illuminating the dull walls. It was a door, slightly ajar with slivers of light spilling out. I hesitated for just a moment, recalling the boy's voice, the urgency that resonated within me. But as I reached the door, a cold rush swept over me. I pushed it open, revealing a dim room full of old medical equipment, lined like silent sentinels. In the center stood a table where a single lamp flickered. "Hello?" I called out, my voice small against the emptiness. No answer. Just as I considered turning back, I caught sight of something on the table. A photograph. My breath caught. It was a picture of a family, smiling in a sunlit park. But the faces seemed familiar, almost haunting. I stepped closer, squinting to see them better. Then I felt it. A shift in the air. A draft that whispered of danger. Suddenly the photograph dropped to the floor, shattering the fragile silence. My heart thudded as I turned, only to find I was not alone. At the doorway stood the boy, eyes wide with terror. "They're coming!" he shouted, his voice trembling. Before I could respond, the lights began to flicker. The room dimmed, shadows creeping from the corners. I could feel the darkness closing in, thick and suffocating. "Run!" I yelled at the boy. "We have to get out of here!" But as I turned to grab his hand, I was met with something far worse. An agonized scream echoed through the room. It was the woman, her face twisting in fear as she was pulled back into the darkness. "No!" I screamed, frozen in place, torn between the boy and the emerging threat. In that moment of indecision, the flickering lights faded, drawing everything into a consuming blackness. I grasped for something, anything, before the shadows enveloped me completely. And then, everything went dark. I was jolted awake, lying on the cold floor of the hospital corridor. My heart raced as I scrambled to my feet, breathless and disoriented. Flashes of the figures, the whispers, and the cold laughter lingered in my mind like shadows just out of reach. I blinked hard, trying to shake off the remnants of the nightmare, but the air felt heavy and charged around me, as if it knew my fears. Panic surged through me. I needed to escape, to find a way out of this place that felt like a trap. I glanced around, and the hospital looked the same, yet different, as if I had crossed into some alternate reality where the darkness thrived. Flickering lights cast erratic shadows along the walls, making it hard to identify what was real. Then, I heard it. The faintest echoes of laughter, far too close for comfort. I started down the hallway, my feet moving instinctively toward the nearest exit. But I felt it again, the sensation of being watched, shadows flickering at the edges of my vision. I pressed on, trying to suppress the urge to look back. As I moved further into the unknown, I passed rooms. I could swear I saw figures within, watching or waiting. I swallowed hard, choosing to ignore them. I thought of the boy. I had to find a way to help him. "I can't leave him," I whispered to myself, but the heaviness of the air made me doubt my resolve. At last, I reached a set of double doors, their metal frames almost glowing with anticipation. I pushed against them, and they swung open, revealing the staircase leading down. Should I go up, where the staff might be, or down, where it felt like somber darkness awaited? With a deep breath, I took the stairs, hoping to find my path. Each step echoed through the silence, and the whispers returned, a soft crescendo that made my skin prickle. "Find the light," they urged. But what light was there? I was beginning to lose track of time, the air around me thickening with every beat of my heart. When I reached the bottom, I emerged into a bustling lobby, eerie in its stillness. The room was dim, almost as if it were suspended in perpetual twilight. Despite the stillness, I could sense movement in the corners of my mind, a presence lingering, following closely behind. I turned to look, but there was nothing, just the rustling of paper and the distant beep of machines. "Help!" It was the boy's voice. I spun around, searching for him among the shadows, but he was gone. Panic clawed at me. I took a moment to steady myself against the reception desk, my hand shaking as it hovered over the bell. I needed someone to hear me, needed help. Suddenly, a door on the far end of the lobby swung open, and a nurse stepped out. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her eyes wide with something resembling fear. The dim light cast shadows across her face, making it hard to see her features clearly. "Please, I need to get out of here," I pleaded. "There are things. There are shadows." She shook her head, stepping back. "This is not your home. You don't belong here," she whispered, and with that, she retreated behind the door, slamming it shut. I felt alone again, Everything felt wrong, and I was left with the memories of laughter and eyes watching me from the dark. I had to find a way out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had already seen too much. As I turned away from that door, another echoed through my mind. The one that had promised an exit, the one calling me to follow the shadows. And as I started to move again, I didn't look back. Not this time. I just kept going into the unknown, half hoping to escape, but deep down knowing my encounter with the darkness wasn't over. The truth lingered in the back of my mind. I might not leave this place unharmed. Even if I managed to escape its grasp, a part of me was forever marked by the whispers, the shadows. I moved deeper into the unknown, convinced I'd find solace beyond the darkness, or at least an answer. I could only hope the light would still be waiting for me somewhere ahead, wherever that may be. I had to keep going. There were still too many questions left unanswered.